Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli, that's Bud Elliott, that's Danny Kanell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live on CBS Sports Network. Fired up to get you set for a massive week ahead in the Big Ten. We got top 10 matchups. We got even more ranked on ranked, and we've got a very tricky road trip for the number one team in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes. So a lot to get into, big game breakdowns, diving into the matchup. And gentlemen, if it's okay with you, we're going to start with a little tail of the tape in this Big Ten title game rematch between the Oregon Ducks and the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, for Penn State, what a massive moment as they've been kind of working their way through the early season schedule. And then the Ducks maybe starting a little bit lower on the radar than Penn State, just an absolute war machine early. And so when we're starting to look at how these teams are stacking up, you can see based on the stats, there is some decided advantages in favor of the Ducks. But we know that Penn State maybe had been doing a little load management. Maybe they had been just making sure they do enough to get warm and get loose with that experienced roster. So we have to do some real clarity exercises. We have to go through and we've got to be able to determine who's got the best at each of the different positions. We did this with Ohio State, Texas leading into week 1. We're very excited to do it here leading into week 5. We are going to break down our full tail of the tape. We need to figure out which team has the better quarterback, which team has the better running backs, which teams have the better wide receivers, which teams have the advantage on defense, and of course, on the sidelines with coaching. So, Danny Kanell, going to start with you. On one side, we've got Drew Aller, much more experience, a lot higher expectations coming into the season. On the other side, we've got Dante Moore, who has been more productive, now, albeit, like I mentioned, with a little bit of a different sort of game outlay. Who do you think has the advantage between Oregon and Penn State at the quarterback position?
I hate this question because it should be a slam dunk. It should be an absolute slam dunk. This is Drew Allers, and it's not even close. And the fact that I even have to sit here and debate it for just in my mind for a couple seconds is flabbergasting to me because so far this season, we haven't seen. Did you see the passing touchdown numbers we put up? Only 5 passing touchdowns on the year, 78th in the country. That's so pedestrian from a player that we all thought had to take that next step. Do you know the last time that Drew Aller threw for 250 passing yards? It was all the way back to the USC game, which they won in overtime. That was 250 passing yards. That is not, I didn't even go 300 passing yards. I don't have to, how far you have to go back for that. All that being said, experience does come into play. Like if you said, who do I want to start a program with? I'd probably say Dante Moore, but because of the experience, because it's at home, I'm going to go with Drew Aller. But I almost feel like I'm going to regret this after the game, but I think you have to go to the quarterback that does have 2 years starting experience. He does have playoff experience. He's played in the Big Ten championship game, so I'm going to go with Drew Aller, but I think this is way closer than I think I want to admit.
Gentlemen?
I agree with Danny. I do think it's far closer than you probably would have thought during the offseason, just considering all the talk and hype surrounding Penn State. I think it really depends how you want to look at it. If you want to go with the experience, if you want to go with the guy who's been in these kind of games before and the guy who's going to be playing at home in front of his home crowd in an electric environment, then you lean Drew Aller. If you're going to go with how they've actually played in 2025, I don't think it's close. I think Dante Moore has been far better than Drew Aller. We talked about those touchdown stats there. Here's another one for you, and I know Bud's probably aware of this. If you go to PFF for big-time throws, Dante Moore's made 7 big-time throws this year. Drew Aller's made 1. That's it. Now, Grant, we could talk about the fact that Penn State has probably been in neutral for most of the season to this point against their non-conference slate, but still, I would like to think that my great quarterback, the guy who's going to be one of the players leading me to a Big Ten title in the playoff, is able to make a few bigger throws against this, bad competition. But to this point, we just haven't seen it. Now, maybe they're saving it for this game. Maybe they're going to come out and he's going to be firing the ball all over the field, tearing this Oregon defense apart. Or maybe Drew Aller is just who Drew Aller is and has been for the last few years, and Dante Moore is somebody with the higher ceiling who's going to be the better quarterback in this game. So I'm leaning Moore. I think that if you look at this season alone, the tail of the tape is on Oregon's side here.
But so far this season, I think you have to lean Dante Moore. I'm really just split on this. I've seen Drew Aller's track record before. We know he's a guy who is certainly capable of making big-time throws. Dante has certainly made some big-time throws. He's not made a lot of big-time throws under pressure. And to me, like that's probably the differentiator here. We have not seen him pressured much this year. Obviously, Oklahoma State is awful. Oregon State's awful. Purdue's defense certainly is really not good at all. So, and Northwestern's the same. I just don't really think here that we have seen Dante have to operate from dirty pockets and make those big time throws. I'm going to lean on the track record and go with Drew.
Okay. Thank goodness we're not just sitting here because the question is for this game, right? The question's not handing out awards for the first month of the season. We're saying for this game. And yeah, for this game, I think that Drew Aller playing at home with the track record, with the experience, what do they call him? They call him Coach K, right? Andy Kotelnicki, that offensive coordinator. Coach K has been working with Drew Aller, trying to get him ready. And as he's been working a little bit on his body type, something he told us at Big Ten Media Days, let's see if he takes off and runs a little bit, shows some of that new mobility as he shed a couple pounds. Okay, from the quarterbacks to their offensive backfield mates, the running back position. Talk about a known, the known quantity of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, one of the best 1-2 punches in college football, has been for quite some time for Penn State. For running back at Oregon, I would say it's been one of the curveballs with the Ducks in terms of we were so locked in on, Mekhi Hughes, the big transfer from Tulane, but instead it has been very much a committee approach, and it has been an approach that has been productive so far because it doesn't matter whether it is Whittington, it doesn't matter whether it is Lamar. There are lots of different contributors who are out there getting it done. Bud, I'll let you get first crack at this. How do you hand out the tail of the tape? Is this easy from the jump to just hand it to Penn State, or do you think that Oregon's maybe got a little bit more of an argument here with that running back by committee?
Yeah, Chip, and I don't want to slight Oregon here because I think Jaden Lamar has played really well for them, and they clearly have a nice stable of backs. But for me, it definitely is easy. I think Singleton and Allen are total studs, and probably the best duo in the country with all due respect to the guys there in South Bend. So yeah, I think this one is pretty easy. I'm going to give it to Penn State.
Yeah, I'll go with Penn State here as well. I think obviously between Allen and Singleton, you do have the household names everybody's aware of. But I do think that as a whole, Oregon's group of running backs is performing very well. And while if you look at what Penn State's done so far this season, I think Katron Allen's played very well. And Nick Singleton has 5 touchdowns. But other than that, I don't feel like Singleton's been the best version of himself that we have seen. I feel like he was far more explosive last year, and we have not seen that really to this point. So I still think overall talent-wise, those two are very good, and I would take both of them over any of Oregon's running backs right now. But I don't think the gap is as wide as it should be.
Agreed, especially considering the expectation coming into the season, because it hasn't been only Drew Aller that they really have struggled to really get going the way you would expect to be. While they've been impressive and Katron Allen has delivered, I would agree with you on Nick Singleton has sort of been underwhelming so far. So I think it's a clean sweep for us right here. Chip, you making it across the board?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's interesting, though. We're starting to build out some momentum here in the tail of the tape. A check at quarterback for Penn State. A check at running back for Penn State. Tom, I want to hear from you first here because Penn State, one of the great challenges for James Franklin was with so many knowns on this roster, what was he going to do to help Drew Aller in terms of reloading that wide receiver position? You go and you get Kyron Hudson from USC in the first portal window, then picking up Trevor Pena in the second portal window. Both of those receivers currently 1 and 2 in terms of receptions and receiving yards. But is that enough when you've got DeCorian Moore, one of the star breakout freshmen right there for Oregon, Gary Bryant, a few other, and if we want to include Sadiq as well, one of the best tight ends in the country, let's call it wide receivers / pass catchers. Tom, who has the edge in this matchup?
Yeah, if we're just going to go pass catchers here, I'm leaning towards Oregon. And I think if they still had a healthy Evan Stewart, this would be kind of a runaway for the Ducks, but they don't. But if I'm going to go for the most talented receiver between these two teams, it's Oregon's DeCorian Moore. If I'm going to go for the most talented tight end between these two teams, it's Kenyon Sadiq at Oregon. So I think they have the two best players. That said, I don't think that the gap is huge. I think that the Kyron Hudson and Trevor Pena have come in. They have played very well. They've productive to this point, far more productive than we saw from most of Penn State's receivers last season. So I do think that they have improved that spot. It's just they don't really have the Tyler Warren right now. They don't have the stud option that they're able to go to, but that might be for the better. They become far less predictable on offense that way. But I think this is a very close one. But right now, my edge goes to the Ducks.
Tom, I'm there with you, but I think this is probably closer to a draw than some of these other categories. Clearly DeCorian Moore, in my opinion, is the best receiver in this game. I agree with you on Sadiq. My question really becomes the number two there for the Ducks. So Malik Benson at Alabama and at Florida State, when he had to play good competition, he disappeared. He was a guy that with his speed would crush bad competition, but he couldn't really run real routes and he couldn't make contested catches. If Penn State is deciding to take away DeCorian Moore in this game, you're going to have to see Malik Benson actually play up against a good team, which throughout his career he has failed to do. So if he doesn't end up playing up, then I think Penn State actually could have the edge here because their number two, Hudson or Pena, depending on who you think, is certainly better now than when what Benson has been in his career so far. But he's had an encouraging start to this year, so we'll have to see if that can continue.
So I might be the only one that thinks this is a little bit more of a separator. I think it's Oregon and I think it does have to do with two players in DeCorian Moore and Kenny Sadiq who are really special. Like you mentioned, having a game plan for DeCorian Moore, really trying to shut him down. Is there a receiver for Penn State that really just strikes fear? You're like, we cannot let that guy beat you. I don't know. They're all pretty good and they're a good wide receiving core, but DeCorian Moore early, the way they've been using him, they've moved him all around the field. His route tree is pretty developed for a true freshman. He's shown the ability to pop the top off. His ball adjustment skills, making some back shoulder throws, has been really back shoulder catches, has been really impressive. Now we'll see more physical, more competition. It should be a bigger challenge for him. And then Kenny Sadiq is a unicorn, it feels like. And I know Luke Reynolds hasn't exactly been Tyler Warren. Those were massive shoes to fill. But Kenyon Sadiq is an absolute stud. So I'll give the edge to the Ducks. I think it's a little bit more clear-cut for me.
All right, so that's a check mark at quarterback for Penn State, a check mark at running back for Penn State, a check mark at wide receiver for Oregon. Couple more categories to go. We got to figure out who's got the edge on defense, who's got the edge on coaching, and the storylines we're watching in this top 10 matchup. So coming up on the other side, continuing to break down Oregon at Penn State and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, looking at all the different angles, all of the angles at Oregon at Penn State. It's a top 10 matchup. It is one of the biggest matchups in all of college football and certainly in the Big Ten. We are running through the tail of the tape, as we like to do with some of the biggest matchups of the college football season. We've got a check mark for Penn State at the quarterback position. We've got a check mark for Penn State at the running back position. We just gave Oregon its first advantage with the check mark at wide receiver. Now it's time to go to the defensive side of the ball. So Danny Kanell, as you look at this defense, which of course now has a name brand new coordinator in Jim Knowles, leaving off a national championship team and heading over to rival Penn State, but also for Oregon, Tosh Lupoy continuing to get settled into a role of a group that is extremely talented and can be dominant. Who do you give the edge to when it comes to defense?
You're killing me coming to these on what I think are the tougher ones.
This is not a tough one.
Poor Danny.
Oh, see, I think it is. I think it is a tougher one. I'm going to go with Penn State. Deni Dennis Sutton has kind of picked off in this lineage of great pass rushers that have been there. Zane Durant's been incredible in the middle of that defense. The secondary's been incredible. They've looked the part so far. AJ Harris is playing spectacular. I'll go with Penn State. I do think they deserve the pedigree. They've been more consistent, but I don't want to overlook Oregon because of players like Mateo Uyunglele, Bruce Betcher at linebackers, really solid. The interior of that defensive line has been better. I think it's closer, but I'll go with Penn State.
I mean, the hardest part of this comparison is that they haven't played anybody yet, really, that it's going to give you a really, truly great idea of who they are. We're not really going to know until these two are lined up across the field from each other on Saturday night. But just based on the talent level, based on the coordinator, based on everything, I give Penn State a slight edge. Statistically, they've been a little bit better against the run this year than Oregon has. They've had more of a pass rush to this point than Oregon has. But there's also been plenty of times where Oregon's just been, when they're up 60 against Oklahoma State, and they're not exactly bringing the house. They're kind of just sitting there and, killing some clock. So it's hard to say definitively. I think they're both very good. And I think they're probably both going to be top 10 at worst in the nation by the time the season ends. But right now, I think Penn State gets my edge, and also the fact that they're going to be at home. They're going to have the crowd on their side screaming their heads off every time they're on the field to distract the Oregon offense. So I give the edge to the Nittany Lions.
I think it's a very small edge to Penn State for all the points that the guys before me have raised. There is a name for the Ducks, though, who could flip this. And that's Bear Alexander. He's not always the most consistent guy, but like on body types, on ability, like his best is probably the best of anybody in this game. We just don't see his best all that often. But if he decides this Saturday he's going to play up, he's a guy who could single-handedly wreck this game and give it to the Ducks.
Has he been starting? Because Amari Washington has been playing more in the D tackle position. But I think this is a year that's huge for Bear. He's kind of coasted a little bit. You wonder if this is sort of his draft year where he's trying to flip the switch. This would be the game you would expect to see the best of Bear Alexander for sure.
Yeah, he hasn't been anything special so far. Just decent. He's played about 100 snaps, but like you've seen some flashes. You need the consistency.
So if I'm to like push this further to one side, if you're going to give me Oregon's linebackers, I would take that. But I think Penn State's better on the defensive line. I think Penn State's better in the secondary. So, 2-1, a little bit of balance. I'm going to give the check mark to Penn State's defense. Okay, what about James Franklin on one side, Dan Lanning on the other, Bud Elliott? Who has the advantage when it comes to coaching?
Man, it's just so tough because obviously I think you have to have a tremendous amount of respect for both staffs. Kotelnicki and Knowles there in Penn State, and obviously they have a great staff as well at Oregon. I mean, I think it's a coin flip, right? Both guys have won a tremendous amount of games. Both guys have really struggled to win in the big game. Luckily for them, somebody has to win this weekend. So, I guess Penn State because I think I like their DC better, but Lanning also has his fingers in the Oregon defense. So I Penn State like ever so slightly.
You went Penn State?
Wow, but
yeah. All right, I'll go. I think it's close, but I'll go Dan Lanning as far as in the totality of the staff. Will Stein has been an absolute genius offensively. The way he's been able to develop quarterbacks. Dante Moore just feels like he's running a lot of the same things Dylan Gabriel is. I think Tosh Lupoy is one of the better defense coordinators, probably didn't get enough credit. And then I don't know if there's a better, it's funny because was talking to Matt Rule last week. I think he's incredible about getting his team ready to go for him. Dan Lanning might be one of the best motivators for a game specifically like this on the road. And yet they don't have that many great road wins either, but I'll give the slight edge to Dan Lanning.
Dan Lanning's a great motivator. He's going to clip what Bud just said about James Franklin being better than him. He's going to be playing it in his office all week, getting hyped for this game. But he won't have to include me. I think this is a very even matchup, like a lot of the things in this game. I think that the coordinators on both sides, Will Stein, Tosh Lupoy, Jim Knowles, Andy Kotelnicki, are fantastic. The one thing that really tilts me towards Oregon's favor, though, when this is very close, is Dan Lanning is the far more aggressive coach on game day than James Franklin. When the moment gets tough, James Franklin sometimes goes conservative. Lanning is always putting his foot down on the gas pedal. That's the direction I always prefer, so Lanning gets an edge here from me.
Do y'all remember in the 2023 season when Lanning, they failed on the fourth down, but he came back and he said, I would do it again against Washington? Mm-hmm. That speaks to what you're talking about. He has an identity. He doesn't waffle. He is the same aggressive, do it because that's what we believe that we can do. I'm with you. I go advantage Dan Lanning, advantage Oregon. I think big game James has shed a little bit of the, the anecdotal evidence that points to him not being ready or having his team ready for these moments, but still some of the decision making in terms of conservative versus aggressive. I agree with you, Tom. I think that Lanning maybe a little bit of an edge right there. So to review, we've got Oregon advantage at quarterback. We got Penn State advantage at quarterback, Penn State advantage at running back. We've got Oregon advantage at wide receiver and pass catchers. We've got Penn State advantage at defense. And then we've got Oregon advantage at coaching. That is 3 to Penn State. That is 2 to Oregon. Bud, what do you think we have missed in our analysis here? What's some X factors or some storylines that will end up determining this matchup?
So if you watch the rematch in the Rose Bowl last year, when Jim Knowles largely shut down Oregon until garbage time, you saw a Penn State team that denied the run. They denied the explosive play. They allowed the short catch, and they tackled really well. I think that's exactly what Penn State is going to have to do here against the Ducks. I am curious, though, if they decide to do things a little bit differently. Might they bring some more pressure? Might they try to put their hands on Decorian Moore and on Malik? Might they say, hey, Dante Moore, you have made some difficult throws. You've not had to make a whole lot of tight window throws, and certainly not with a lot of pressure around you. Like Will Stein, the Oregon offensive coordinator, does such a tremendous job of getting these free access throws and these run after catch opportunities for his guys. If you're Penn State, do you make Oregon be a little more patient? Do you make that, like, take away that first read and make them sit a little bit more? I think that, like, Jim Knowles' game plan here is going to matter a lot in this game, especially with clearly the most amount of pressure in terms of pass rush that Dante's going to have faced, and also like the crowd noise there with Penn State.
I just want to know if Penn State can flip the switch, or if this is just who Penn State is, the team that we've been watching, because we've talked about it a lot. They've looked like a team that's kind of just going at half speed in what's a non-conference slate that has not been challenging in any aspect for them. So you're at home, top 10 team coming, the team you lost to in the Big Ten championship. It's a whiteout. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be insane. Will that atmosphere from the crowd kind of partake in what Penn State's trying to do on the field? Because if you look at them statistically, man, like their passing attack, they are 66th in EPA per dropback. They're 89th in explosive pass rate. And in the red zone, they're scoring 4.59 points per trip. That ranks only 58th. Now, you could say they're only going half speed, but they're also doing it against nobody. And typically elite teams, even against nobody when they're not trying that hard, perform far better than Penn State has to this point in the season. So this is huge for me. This is going to be the biggest part of the game. Do we see Penn State take it up a notch and play at a different level? Or is the team we've seen through their first 3 or 4 games of the year just who they are? And are they in for a world of hurt against this Oregon squad?
I want to see the wrinkles, the things we haven't seen yet. We've all mentioned it several times, like what are they holding back? And I think that means for offense and defense. I feel like Penn State, I'm hoping they have hold back a lot because they haven't looked that good against the lesser competition. But I will say the biggest X factor for me, do you guys remember what Drew Aller told us when he talked about trimming down? Do you remember what he said? He said he wanted to be a little bit more athletic in the run game. We haven't seen that yet. In the Big Ten championship game against Oregon, he did have 54 yards rushing. He has not he's not run the ball very much so far. I wonder a couple things. One, does he scramble? And do they have designed RPO option type action for Drew Aller to get involved in the run game? Just something to keep an eye out for with Drew Aller.
Great call, Danny. I mean, this is where I have to remember that before Penn State, Andy Kotelnicki had Jalen Daniels, in which you definitely built in some of those, RPO designed quarterback run concepts. Great call. We'll be keeping an eye on that from Penn State's quarterback in this matchup. Again, that is Saturday night, Oregon at Penn State, but big time matchup leading into that, because in the afternoon on CBS, it will be the Ohio State Buckeyes taking on Washington out in Seattle. And coming up on the other side, everything that you need to know about the matchup. It's big game breakdown between the Buckeyes and the Huskies and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, going inside the matchup with a big game breakdown for big time. It is number 1, Ohio State, going across the country to go play Washington out in Seattle, Husky Stadium, sailgating and all. And for this matchup, man, we've got a very fascinating head-to-head of two new starting quarterbacks. Of course, Julian Sayin taking over for Ohio State, and DeMond Williams, though he got a good bit of run in a bowl game for Washington last year, this has been his first season as the full-fledged, undoubted QB1. DK, our resident quarterback here on the Cover 3 podcast, we're not going to do tail of the tape. We did that earlier, but I do want to get your analysis, how you've graded each of these quarterbacks. You know, Julian Sayin did enough against a very good Texas defense early. Then things have been a little bit lighter going through Grambling and Ohio. DeMond Williams, of course, with 8 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, 2 of those coming on the ground, also has the Huskies off to a 3-0 start. Danny, what do you make of what you've seen from both these quarterbacks so far this year?
When I see that graphic, DeMond Williams holding the football, I just remember how small he is because that ball looks huge in his hands. And he was not as big as we thought he was going to potentially be. That point aside, I think they've both been really, really good. I think everybody kind of knows about Julian Sayin because of the hype that was surrounding him coming in. And he's done a great job operating the system. He looks very comfortable within it. But his first road start, this will be a great opportunity for him to take that next step forward. Like, he's passed all the tests that he's had so far. This is sort of the next evolution of being the quarterback at Ohio State. Now you have to take it on the road. The other quarterback in DeMond Williams, I think, is one of the better kept secrets in college football. He's been incredibly dynamic. I was actually talking to Jed Fish before the game when we were out at Nebraska, and he came on our pregame show, and he tended to agree. He's like, man, we have a special quarterback. And that is one aspect to DeMond Williams' game that can wreak havoc on any defense, no matter how good you are, is the ability to run the football and get it done with your legs. And he's been very protective of it, has not turned the ball over, been close to perfect. So I think this is a really, really fun matchup and a really good test for Ohio State in one of the better atmospheres in college football. That's sort of one of the better kept secrets, their quarterback and the environment out there in Seattle.
Yeah, Danny, I'm really excited about the battle of play callers here. Ryan Day obviously designing that offense, and Brian calling it. But like Jed Fish, I think he's such a great designer of offense. He finds ways to feed their studs and make things pretty easy, for DeMond Williams. The issue is, gosh, the Ohio State defensive backfield is so veteran and so good, and all the backers can run and cover, and they can show you such a great variety of looks, and they're clearly going to try to scheme to take away Boston, the stud receiver, for the Huskies. I'm curious to see what the other options look like for Washington and how much they can get DeMond Williams' legs involved as well.
Yeah, I think we showed the stats earlier, the breakdown between Williams and Sayin, and I think it needs to be mentioned that a lot of the damage that Julian Sayin did came against Grambling in Ohio. Like, he made up a lot of numbers after a pretty pedestrian performance against Texas in his first start, which, not knocking him for, that's one of the best defenses in the country you're going up against in your first career start. So it's not like I expected him to come out and play fantastic, but I do think that this is another big test, and after what we saw from him against Texas, this isn't something that we should just look at his numbers and say, oh, he's been great, he's going to come, he's going to tear this Washington defense apart. Because as Danny talked about, Husky Stadium is a very difficult stadium to play in for opposing teams. Washington, in the playoff era, if you take out the 2020 COVID season when there weren't any fans in the stands, they're 55-15 at home. That win percentage ranks 18th nationally. And you have to think, if you're Julian Sayin, you've never played in an environment like this where while you're at the line of scrimmage trying to get the calls in, trying to do everything, the crowd is screaming, the stadium is shaking, you can barely hear your own thoughts. So what kind of procedural mistakes might we see them make at the line of scrimmage before the snap that could lead to problems, that could lead to turnovers, that could lead to short fields for Washington to help them keep them in the game? But on the other side of this, if you look at Ryan Day, since he's come at Ohio State, this is an insane statistic. In true road games, Ohio State is 21-3 under Ryan Day. They have lost fewer games on the road under Day than they have at home. This has been a team that's gone on the road and performed very well. And to Bud's point, you look at their defense, they're going to be able to keep the Buckeyes in the game no matter what happens with this offense. The question will be, can Ohio State avoid the mistakes? Can they finally start leaning more on their run game than we've seen them do to this point to help move the ball, which they weren't really able to do against Texas, to help out Julian Sayin and not put too much on his shoulders? I think that's going to be a huge matchup in this game.
Another matchup that I've definitely got my eye on. I have a great memory, many great memories from our time at Big Ten Media Days. But Tom, when you looked lovingly into Jedd Fisch's eye and you saw him and man-to-man, you said, you have a type. You have a type, and it's a 6'4" cornerback that's about 200 pounds. And Tacario Davis is that type. Throw in, so Tacario Davis at one cornerback position, Prysock at the other one, another 6'4", 200 some odd pound player. You know, those types of bodies are what you are going to need to try and contain Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and the rest of these Ohio State wide receivers. Bud just gave a great example of Ohio State, how they're trying to defend Denzel Boston, who is among the best wide receivers in the country. But what about the alpha? How does Washington contain Jeremiah Smith? Tom, how do you think it happens?
I think you're probably going to shade coverage to him, like a second guy, whether it's over the top or just underneath, and you're going to try to force them to go other directions. You're going to want to make Julian Sain get through progressions. You're just going to want to take away the first read, and Jeremiah Smith's going to be the first read many times. But if you're Ohio State, perhaps you counter that, and you don't make maybe Jeremiah Smith. We've seen them do this before, Ohio State, Marvin Harrison. There were quite a few games where Marvin Harrison was just a decoy. He was attracting attention, and Ohio State went to other guys. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar here, because you can maybe slow down Jeremiah Smith. You really can't take him out of the game unless Ohio State chooses to.
That's what's so good about having a guy like Carnell Tate that you have as an option if they are shading coverage. Last year was Emeka Egbuka, who obviously parlayed that into a first-round draft pick. I mean, it's pretty nice to have a plethora of weapons, but I do think this is one where, you know, if you call him a decoy, then you're not even thinking about him. But I do think when you give a young quarterback like Julian Sain, you're going to call your plays accordingly, and that's where it becomes a priority for Julian Sain to recognize, are they shading coverage, or is there an opportunity still to go to Jeremiah Smith, or do I want to get through my progressions, get off of him, get to some of the other routes? So something to keep an eye on. Having bigger corners does absolutely help. Jeremiah Smith is an absolute beast. I don't think you're going to stop him altogether. You just have to make sure you're not trying to force the ball to him, which can be a tendency for a younger quarterback, especially first big start on the road.
And to your point about rolling coverage, like is Tacario Davis going to play for Washington? Because, you know, he missed last week. We already know one of their stud linebackers is out for this game. They've been hoping to get Javon Parker, their best defensive lineman, back for a while now. But again, he did not play last week. Washington is not a team that has a depth of studs on defense. You really need your studs to play. So you're already down the backer. We don't know yet about, you know, arguably their best corner, although Ephesians Prysock has been, you know, really a revelation for them. I think the problem is Ohio State has so many weapons that if you do overcommit to taking away Jeremiah Smith, that's just going to be easy throws for Julian Sain. Washington, though, is one of the very best in the nation so far at pressure rate without blitzing. So that defensive line has gotten pressure, but again, we do have to ask, like, who have they actually played? Ohio State, we have already seen them do an okay job blocking an elite Texas front.
Yep, we will keep an eye on Davis's status, listed as the starter on the game week depth chart by Washington. But of course, we'll get injury reports, official and unofficial as well. Keep it locked into 24/7 Sports for all the latest on that. Okay, Bud, let's just make this simple. It is Husky Stadium, and we've talked about that environment. This is the number one team in the country. This is, they got tested, certainly, but on their own home field against Texas. On a scale of 1 to 10, Bud, how much of an upset alert is the Ohio State Buckeyes under right now?
I'd say like a 2 or 3. I expect.
Low.
I guys, like if Washington was full strength, then I would believe it more. But I don't think they have a depth of special players in this team. I think they need their studs to be studs. I think they need their studs to be on the field. I don't think Ohio State has much to worry about here.
I would put it at a 3.5. And I don't know if I would go much higher than that. I think if you're Washington, you're going to want to establish your ground game, which you've been outstanding at, don't get me wrong, to start the season. Jonah Coleman, Adam Muhammad, Damon Williams, they've combined for 712 yards on the ground, 6.4 per attempt with 13 touchdowns. But this Ohio State run defense is a monster. So that Washington offensive line with Carver Willis and Drew as a party at tackle, the Hatchet brothers on the inside, they're going to have to win a lot of battles consistently to kind of move those dudes out of the way. And that's been very hard because Caden McDonald and Will Smith on the Ohio State defensive line have been outstanding to start the season. So it's an uphill battle for them. I think that you need to hope that your crowd helps turn the ball over with Julian Sain and confuses him, causes some problems, and that you're able to just move the ball on the ground.
I'll go 4.5. I think the point spread is pretty interesting. The fact that it's not over double digits, the odds makers maybe think this is a little bit closer. I have my concerns about Washington's defense, slowing down Jeremiah Smith and this Ohio State attack. They haven't exactly been airtight against lesser competition so far this year. So, do you picture a shootout of Damon Williams and company going back and forth with Ohio State? Probably not, but I think parity is here. I think this is still one of the best rosters in college football. I don't think it would be crazy to see an upset, but I'll put it at 4.5. Still pretty low.
Crank that, baby. No, this is a 6. This is a watch out. This is going to have the entire nation wait a second, why is that only a 7-point game right now? That's what I think that the 8.5 is perfect, because Ohio State will have this way too close late. And then we get to find out whether Julian Sayin can grow up on the fly in the fires of Husky Stadium. I do think Ohio State ends up winning, but I'm going to crank this up to a 6. If Ohio State takes anything lightly about this matchup, they could go and get got by Husky Stadium. So I'll give it just a little bit higher, but ultimately, let it be read into the record, I do think the Buckeyes come out of week 5 with a 0 in the loss column. Well, coming up on the other side, we've got a big bounce back moment for Brett Bielema and the Fighting Illini as USC is coming to town. How does Illinois rebound from the loss to Indiana? And can USC get it done away from home? All that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, running through some of the biggest games on the Big Ten schedule for week 5. And we've got USC on the road taking on an Illinois team that is very much licking its wounds. And I do this not because I want Tom to relive Saturday night. I do not. But no one's going to have a better insight in the way that the Fighting Illini can respond from that lopsided loss to Indiana. Now, they're playing back at home. It's a big stage. Tom, what is going to be the key to Illinois making sure that one loss doesn't become 2 with USC in town?
The injury report. I mean, this was, we talked about it. Illinois was already banged up in the secondary before the game started, and then they got more banged up as they went along. Xavier Scott is still going to be out. Matthew Bailey, their starting safety, has been in concussion protocol all week. There is no guarantee that he will be back for this game. So if you look at that in the back end and what USC is bringing with Jaden Maeva and Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane and just an incredible passing attack so far this season, I would be terrified if I'm Illinois and I'm still really banged up on my back end, because that is something that USC will very much be able to exploit. And I think that the likely counter that you're going to see from the Illini is this is a team that to this point has only run the ball 50% of the time, which ranks 87th nationally as far as rushing rate. It's, teams are throwing more and more, shock of all shocks. But the USC's defense, it's better than what we've seen in recent years, and it is improving. But the one spot where I've seen a weakness so far this year, both statistically and just with my eyes, is their run defense. So if you're Illinois, your defense is incredibly banged up and you're facing an explosive passing offense, you're probably going to want to lean more into your run game, to which this point in the year has not been outstanding. So it's going to be a problem for them, but they're going to have to do it just to keep that defense off the field and try to shorten this game and limit the overall possessions, because you do not want to get into a shootout with this USC team with the current state of your roster, even if your passing attack has been good so far this year. So I expect very much a more old school Brett Bielema at Wisconsin kind of offense than the one we've seen at Illinois so far.
Are we ready for the body clock conversation yet? Because this is a 9 a.m. body clock for USC. We'll see how they are getting up in this one. I think we'll learn more about USC in this game than Illinois. I feel like I know what Illinois is now, and it's not there. I don't think they're as bad as they showed there. The injuries have been documented, but if I think USC could be in that conversation, the same as Indiana could be, this is a good litmus test to see if that defense, which is number 1 in the country in sacks, can they get after the quarterback the way that Indiana did? Can they, can Jaden Maeva take advantage of a secondary the way that Mendoza was able to last week? I think this is more of a litmus test for USC, where we find out about them than Illinois. Very curious to see how Illinois responds here.
Completely. Like USC has been a poor road team under Lincoln Riley so far, but I think they may be better on the road this year. I think to Tom's point, this all comes down to the injury report for Illinois. Illinois' backups have played like backups when they've had to go to starting roles. That's just not been very good. Obviously, we're worried about Jacoby Lane. Like I haven't seen a new status report on him this weekend, but some chatter. I don't know exactly when he's going to get back. USC's a lot more dangerous when he's in the lineup. But you have Lemon, you have Wayman Jordan, who's one of the very best backs in the Big Ten. Quarterback's playing really well. I think I agree with Danny. It's a test for USC. Like, will you show up and beat a banged up Illini?
But are you willing to say so far that USC has matched any kind of preseason buzz or hype, or do you need to see a performance in a game like this to be able to feel better about them really like exceeding the expectations and matching some of that sort of dark horse conversation?
Yeah, I don't know if they really met the annual expectations provided by one Chip Patterson on the Cover 3 podcast, but I think they've met the preseason expectations for most of the fans. I think some of the questions still linger, right? Do they have enough difference makers on defense? We know that their starting guard did not get his extra year of eligibility, and they were very thin at that spot. The backup has played poorly overall against some lackluster competition. So when they do play better defensive linemen, like they'll face James Thompson this week, does he get exposed, right? I think the interior of the offensive line for USC remains a question. Good tackle play, quarterback's taking a big step forward. I think they look much improved.
Yeah, I'd say this is Prove It Saturday for the USC Trojans taking on Fighting Illini, which should be tough in Champaign. Noon Eastern time kickoff for that one. Just a nice little Big Ten day of headliners. Well, speaking of headliners, coming up on the other side, we love to leave you with a player to watch each and every week. Our Big Ten players to watch for Week 5 next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, always love to leave you with the player to watch in the Big Ten each week. Danny Kanell, who's your player to watch?
I'm going to look at Mekhi Lemon. I can't wait to see this USC wide receiver, see how he does against a banged-up Illinois secondary. We saw Fernando Mendoza go off with 5 touchdown passes. He's explosive, 4th in the country in receiving yardage. I would expect him to have a big game. We'll see if he can do it.
Bud?
I'm going to go with Indiana linebacker Isaiah Jones. Indiana's defense clearly had a very good week last week, and that defensive line has received plenty of attention. But I think one of the guys who is very much benefiting from what that defensive line has been able to do has been Jones. He's got 16 tackles on the season, including 6.5 for loss and 3 sacks. He's been he started blitzing a lot more last week against Illinois than he had been previously, and he was very effective at it. Indiana's got to follow that up on the road this week against Iowa, another vulnerable offense. I think Jones is going to have a very big game against an Iowa team looking to run the ball a lot.
I'm going to go with Malik Benson of Oregon. We've seen this at Bama. We've seen it at Florida State. He kind of kills these bad teams. He kind of shrinks against the good teams. Oregon might need him to make a big play on a deep ball in this game. If he plays up, I really like the Ducks' chances to win.
And I'm going to turn your attention to Jonah Coleman, who is not only the running back for Washington and a key to the ground game. Guys, he's also the team's second leading receiver in receptions and also in receiving yards. It's a lot of Denzel Boston, Denzel Boston, Denzel Boston. Go make a play, Jonah. And he's going to have to go and make some plays because I imagine, as Bud mentioned earlier, that this Ohio State secondary could have a lot of attention and a lot of pressure right there on Denzel Boston. So Jonah Coleman, the Washington running back, is my player to watch. Well, if you like what you saw, if you like what you heard, the Cover 3 podcast is live every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Of course, you can catch us live on Saturday nights. We get started about 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time with our instant reaction show, recapping all of the action from all across college football. And if you want to, you can just hit that QR code so you can subscribe to the Cover 3 podcasts wherever you get your fine podcasts.